Maddie, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, I am so excited that you're here. I recently found you on Instagram and have just kind of fallen in love with the resources you're providing for kids ministry leaders and just how, I feel like you've done a good job at creating a space online that is for adults, but adults who love kids ministry, and it's a hard balance to find. And it's always fun when kind of people enter the social media world that are wanting to equip and encourage kids ministry leaders. And so I was like, I've got to have her on the podcast. And so why don't you kind of start the conversation off by sharing a little bit about yourself, your experience in kids ministry, talk to us about kind of maybe your family, and then what does your ministry look like now?
Yeah. So I did not know that kids. Okay, wait, pause. I have to say something first. The way I talk, I have a vocal cord spasm. It's this really cool thing called spasmodic dysphonia. So for anyone who's listening, if you hear it, don't worry about it. I'm not worried about it. You don't have to worry about it. It's gonna be great. Okay. So I did not know that I enjoyed working with kids, or that even it's a gift to like working with kids, until I was in college. I was playing with some kids at a gathering, and somebody said, you're gifted at working with kids. And I was like, no, I'm not. Like anybody can play with kids, you know?
Right.
But that kind of stuck with me. And I realized after that point, I started watching other adults, and I'm like, oh, like not everybody likes to play with kids, you know, or not everybody knows how to tell a story that kids want to listen to. And so that was like the first little seed that the Lord planted in my heart of like, hey, this is something not just like, oh, you like to play with kids, but like, oh, you can like actually impact kids. And so, yeah, after college, I started working in a kids ministry at my church. I was like, of all the places I could be, I applied at our church and got a job coordinating volunteers, which is really funny because I'm not a detail person, like not even close to a detail person. And so very quickly, my boss learned that wasn't the best seat on the bus for me, but he let me stay. So the job kind of evolved into creative things, because I was like, hey, I know I'm not good at emails, but I can design a t-shirt for you.
Yeah.
And so that's really how I kind of got into the vein of creative kids ministry, is just saying, hey, I like kids. This is what I can do. This is what I'm good at. Can I stay here and do that, please? So for the next decade, I worked with our church and became the creative director for the kids ministry. And then met my husband. He's wonderful. He's a kids pastor at our church. And then we had two wonderful little girls that now I get to stay home with. And so kind of ministry has shifted a bit for me in this season. Because it was, and for any kids pastors or kids ministers that are listening, you know, it's like 24/7. It's like a full-time, even if you're part-time, we call it part-time, full-time at our church because you're always on. And so going from that to taking a step back to spend time with our kids and to raise them, I kind of found myself in this place of like, okay, I'm still crazy passionate about kids, passionate about kids ministry and getting the gospel into kids' hands. I mean, now more than ever, because kids need Jesus so bad. And so I was like, what can I do from my living room during nap time? And so that's why I started the Instagram page. And I was like, anything I can do to encourage church leaders to get kids ministries projects accomplished, if they need things done or need help with things, I'm like, I'll do it. So that's kind of what brought me to this place.
That's awesome. Did you go to school for the creative things that you're able to do, or was this like all self-taught?
It was self-taught. So when I started working at the church, and we found that I wasn't good at emails, I just asked my boss, I said, can you get me a computer that can do creative things, and I will figure out how to do it. And he was like, okay, if we get the computer, you figure out how to do it. So that was when Groupon was a really big deal.
Yes.
So I paid $35 for a Photoshop class on Groupon, and I just dove in. And I mean, if you could see some of the things that I first designed for our kids ministry, it's like it's garbage. Like, it's so bad. But it was fun just being able to be like, you know what? I saw that our kids ministry could use improvement in the design world. And I was like, I don't know how to do it yet, but I'm going to find out. And so I did. The Lord helped me.
That's incredible. It's not only incredible that like your boss, one, let you stay in a role that you weren't gifted in, but also was like, here's a computer,
Right.
like do like, here's the freedom to learn a new skill while we're paying you to do a job that you're not gifted in.
Right.
Like just that whole process is like, most employers would not do that. They'd be like, if you're not in the right spot, we're going to like kindly let you go and bring somebody else in who could do this well. But then in a lot of roles, it's hard to find the space to learn something new. And I think like what a gift that was for your boss to like see this drive in you, and not, and just for you, I think it goes both ways. For you to speak up and say, hey, I see this need. Can you give me some time to figure it out? Like, and I think that is brave of you, but also some encouragement for the kids ministry leaders listening of like, if you see a hole, like it's okay to keep learning. Like in a role, you don't have to know all the things, and you can say, hey, I see this hole in this ministry. Can you give me the space to learn how to do it well? And like, look at where it has you now. It's just like, you just don't know. And so I think it's okay to keep learning. It's okay to express that need. It's like, can you pay? I think it's like, can you pay for a Photoshop or Adobe or something? I don't know. This is not my area of my area of knowledge. And so I'm like, whatever program you use. And so it is like, could you cover the cost of this so that I could learn and make the ministry better?
I think too, like if we can just do, this is something that we say at our church all the time, but like do the best with what's in your hand. And so like if you're in a position where you're like, man, it could be better, you don't have to be great at what you're hoping to be great at one day. Like just start somewhere. Like if you're like, hey, we can get a free subscription to Canva, and you know, after my kids go to bed, I have 30 minutes that I can try to figure it out. Like do that. Like that's better than nothing. So I think if people can just start somewhere, I think that is huge. And then not be intimidated. Like just jump in. If all you can do is a $35 Groupon class, like do it. Like that's great.
For sure. And I think even thinking back to like when I first began in ministry, Canva was not a thing. And it's like, what a gift that Canva is in general. Like we're celebrating that resource, but then also like we're living in a world where there is no shortage of opportunities to learn from things like YouTube or different courses or different things that are offered from people who have been doing this and are good teachers at it. And so I think it is like, hey, if you've got 30 minutes a week of extra time, what would it look like for you to pay for this course and watch it and learn something new to ultimately make your job better? And like Maddie, for you, you went on and like served probably multiple campuses, and now you're serving multiple churches. And it's just like, that is always so fun to see, like you were once serving one church and now you're serving multiple churches with this kind of hidden gift that God had given you that like you didn't realize until you had the opportunity to see what it was. So that is really cool. And I'm slightly jealous because again, being creative and like creating things is not my area of expertise.
That is okay. You're probably a lot better at emails than me.
I just don't have the creative eye. And so that kind of brings me to my next question is, and I shared this story with you before we hit record, but early on in ministry, in one church context, we did not have a creative team that was on our staff. And we often hired out for any sort of creative graphic or flyer or whatever we needed done. And I remember having a conversation with the person that we had hired out, and they just couldn't understand what I was trying to get at in terms of like, it needs to be for kids ministry. It needs to be able to be attractive to families and parents, but also it needs to look like it was made for kids. Like there needs to be this balance of kids meets adults in the way that the graphic presents itself. And so as you are kind of thinking about, well, maybe I could do this for other churches, like kind of are there other people doing this out in the world? Because I know like there's companies, there's websites like Fiverr and other websites where you can hire out a creative person to do your projects. But is there something like this for kids ministry, or where you're like, I don't see this happening? I think it'd be really beneficial and I'm going to fill this gap.
Yeah. I think I'll say I didn't go into a ton of research before I jumped in. I think my biggest motivating factor was like, I have several kids pastor friends who are at a smaller church that doesn't have a creative person, like you said, for kids. So they maybe have a creative person for their church, but even if that person could squeeze out a little bit of time for the kids ministry, it's not their wheelhouse. And so that's kind of what motivated me, was like, I just saw a problem with just a few friends, and I was like, I could fix that. Like I could and so honestly, I just called a couple of people and was like, hey, I know you don't have a kids creative person. I'm just home. So if you need a graphic, like I promise I'm not going to charge you $1 million. Like I just want to help and feed my family. That's my goal. So,
yes, good goals.
But yeah, so I think I have not seen a lot of other people providing creative things for kids ministries. And so I think it is definitely a need. And I think kids pastors are some of the most creative thinkers like in the world. But they don't always know how to get it from here to like here. Exactly. So that's my hope in working with different churches, is I'm trying to take, when they're like, oh, I want it to look like this, I want to take that and like, ta-da, like do it. Because that is a gift the Lord has put in me, and this is a season that I can do that. So that's the goal.
That's so fun. It's so fun. It is fun. I think you're right in saying that kids ministry leaders tend to be more visionary. I've seen like there's like the really visionary kids ministry leaders, and then there's like the really detail oriented kids ministry leaders. But finding, and you experienced of this, like you can't really be all creative all the time in kids ministry, because there is admin work that has to get done. Right. And there is organization that has to get done. And so I feel that a lot of, man, I have all these ideas, but I don't have the skill set. I don't have the time, because I can sit on Canva and try and create something, and it takes me probably like 3 times longer than it would take someone like you to do it. And I'm like, well, this is a waste of my time, because I'm never going to be happy with it. And so I think I haven't seen hardly anybody do this. Of course, like if you are purchasing like a curriculum, you get all of those graphics for the curriculum, but there's a lot of people who are writing their own curriculum or doing their own thing or looking for some church swag, and they need rebranded or whatever. And I just don't feel like there's a lot of people in this space. So I'm like, so excited that Maddie is here to fill that hole.
Well, thanks. I'm excited too.
Yes. Okay. So talk to us a little bit about, we're going to like zoom out a little bit. Why does design matter? Why do you think having really great graphics and good social media posts, and like why, for someone who may be like, I don't understand why do we need graphics? Why would we use our finances for that? What's the purpose? Why can't we just send an email? Like all of those kind of thoughts. Talk a little bit about, why do you think it's important that people spend time and resources into creating really well done slides, graphics, flyers, handouts, all the things?
Yeah. So I think if you kind of, like you said, you have to zoom out really big, but people are visual people. And especially in the church world, statistically, I just looked this up actually because I was talking to a friend about it, but a family will decide within 10 minutes if they're going to come back to your church. So you've got 10 minutes to get them. So that does not include sermons or worship or the kids' experience or anything. It mostly includes what they see and hear. So if you think of it that way, and then on top of that, if you look at the American family, kids are driving the bus. Like they are driving the bus. So if kids don't want to be somewhere, the family's probably not going to be. But on the flip side, if a kid is like, please can we go to church? Please can we come to church? Even like I've talked to so many parents who got saved because their kid was like, please can we go to church? And parents are like, I don't want to say no to church. It seems like a good thing, even if they don't love Jesus. So all that to say, if we can get the kids, we can get the family, and the way we're going to get the kids is if it looks like fun. Like, it has to look fun and professional. I think like we are competing because kids and families have access to anything and everything. It's like in the old days, you could get away with less because nobody knew what else was out there. But now everybody knows what's out there. They know Disney, they know YouTube, they know Netflix, they know what all this work that people are putting into other things. And so they're going to instantly compare, even if they're not trying to. Kids, kids might be like, well, like that video was, it was okay, but it wasn't as good as that one, So I think just like we sweep the floors at our church because we don't want people to walk in and think, ew, this place is dirty. Like the same thing, it's like we're presenting our kids' ministry to a family, and we want to do the best that we can. Now, that doesn't mean if it's not the best, it's not valuable. Because everyone has to start somewhere. But I think it's our job to just present the best that we can. So when it comes to graphics, I'm all about it because I'm like, if we can visually catch people, whether it's on Instagram or with a handout or with a video or with a graphic or a t-shirt, whatever, if we can catch them, then we can keep them. So that's my goal, is like, let's get them first. And then once we've got them, then we have this platform, this opportunity that we can pour into them. So
I think that's really wise. And I like kind of, there's always a balance, right? And we have this conversation when we're talking about like creating environments and like, you don't have to have the most expensive furniture in your building. You don't have to have brand new paint. Like, there are some churches who are doing the best with what they can. And I think, I love the way you put it, of like, we're putting our best foot forward with the resources that we have, the financial investment that we can make, the space that we are in. Like, you think about all the church plants and churches meeting in schools and all of those types of environments. And it's like, maybe it's not ideal, but this is where God has us, and we're going to present our best self in the space that God has us. And I think signage and graphics are such an easy way to spruce up your environment and make it really clear. And like, I think about, sometimes there are TVs in classrooms, and oftentimes it's like, well, you turn the TV on and there's like, it's a blue screen with like input on it waiting to like get plugged in. And it's like, what if you just had a graphic that was like, welcome to so-and-so kids ministry? Like, even that small thing shows some intentionality. And it just, as a parent and as a volunteer and for kids, it's just that one extra thing that is super easy to do. And it just makes a much greater impact than we would think. And so I think that's true. I think having some really clear and readable and exciting graphics, signage, all of those sorts of things are a really huge piece to welcoming families, sharing about who you are and what you're doing, and then hopefully inviting families to come back. So I think that's really great.
Yeah, I'm going to tell a quick story.
Go for it.
I was on a missions trip in Ethiopia, and we went to visit just people's houses. So we were taking baskets of food to visit people's houses. And we got to this lady's house, and she was scurrying, like she was trying so hard to clean. And she got out her broom, and she's like, as we walked up, she's sweeping her floor. Well, her floor is dirt. Like, it's literally on the ground dirt. There's nothing in between the ground and her floor. It's dirt. But she's sweeping it. And it spoke to me. Like, she is so concerned with presenting her space to be respectable. So she wanted us to know that she had put in the work, because she was like, this is my home. I'm a dignified person. I'm going to sweep this floor, And I think if we can value our spaces like that, it has stuck with me forever. Like, anytime someone comes to my house, I sweep the floor. And I'm like, I know you don't care, but I care. But really, it's almost like that in our kids' ministries. It's like, even if you have a dirt floor, like, sweep it. So even if all you have is one TV screen, put something on it, you know, or if all you have is, you know, we have these little, we call them wavy signs, but it's just like a plastic sign with a paper holder. If that's what you have, like, do your best with that.
Yeah.
Because it just speaks to families without having to talk to them. It instantly tells them, like, okay, the kids matter here. Like, it looks like they place a value on my kids, which makes me feel comfortable in leaving them here, which makes me want to come back, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And it's important to just note that, like, perfection, because again, like, it's that balance of, like, nothing has to be perfect.
Right.
But I do think there is a level of excellence that we can pursue as ministry leaders. And like I say this all the time of, like, don't do a million things mediocre, do a couple things with excellence.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it kind of falls in line with that of, like, perfection is not the goal.
Right.
Because we will never reach perfection.
Never.
But we can shoot for excellence and do things diligently and do things with excellence unto the Lord. And so I think, like, having that in mind is always important whenever we talk about environments and space and graphics and all of those extra things that people may feel like are extra or add-ons.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. Obviously, because we're on the podcast and I'm asking a question. So of course I have another question for you. But kind of like, talk to me about the social media aspect of this, of, like, not necessarily graphics in a building or in a hallway, but, like, why should graphics on social media platforms, and I think this is a big conversation that kids ministry leaders are having right now, of, do we utilize social media? Like, I feel like there's this weird tension of, like, it's good, it's bad, it's helpful, it's not helpful. Like, we want people on it, but we don't want people addicted to it. Like, this weird kind of tension of, like, what do we do with social media? And I would love to kind of hear from your perspective, how can we use social media in a way that is not requiring people to be on it all the time, but just and being informative and exciting, and kind of using social media as a really great first impression?
Yeah. So social media, like you said, it's like a double-edged sword. It's like, on one side, it's like, this is the most powerful free opportunity we've had in this century. And at the same time, it's like, is it really free though? What does it cost? You know? And so it's like kind of this in between, because you don't want to put people into a position where it's like, ooh. But I think if we can remember, like, we aren't putting people on social media, we're meeting people at social media. So I think that's important to think. They're already there. The parents are there, the kids are there, the grandmas are there. Like, literally everyone is there. And if you had in your city, if you had a gathering of 100,000 families with young kids, like, I hope that you would be there with your kids ministry doing something to say, like, hey, we're over here, like, come see. You know, if it was like, hey, we're just having a family gathering where people get to experience what's going on in our city, like, I hope our kids ministries would be there. And it's kind of the same thing. You've got, you can touch millions of people for free. So it's like, I would encourage kids ministries to be there. Now, it comes with a grain of salt, because different platforms encourage different things. So I'm going to just use TikTok as an example. Millions of kids are on TikTok, but also TikTok is I call it a black hole of sadness. Like, it's it can become a really dangerous place for kids. So that is, you know, you really have to pray about that. It's between you and your pastor and the Lord. So I wouldn't just say, like, hey, everyone should be on TikTok. Personally, I think you'd really want to look at that, and how are we going to leverage that? Because it can be a dangerous space. I think on YouTube and Instagram, you can put a few more parameters that are helpful as far as protection goes for kids. So it's kind of both ends, but I do think we got to be there. That's where people are. And that is how we're going to reach them. If you think of my generation who is just raising up, like most people my age have young elementary kids. Mm-hmm. So that's like who we're shooting for. They're all on Instagram. Like everybody has an Instagram. And so if we want to get them, that is a great space to do it. And then on top of that, if you're going to have a social media account, again, make it the best you can make it. Like, again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but don't just slap something up there just to have it. Like, think through, is this actually, like, if I was a parent looking at this, would it catch my eye if I was scrolling through? And if not, then you want to put a little more time into it to make it something that would hopefully catch people's attention. So,
yeah. Because I feel like 5, 10, however many years ago, the website was a first impression.
Yes.
Which it still is in a lot of ways. Like, you find a church, you look at their website. But at this, like, now, social media is a first impression.
Right.
And when people are new to a city or looking for a new church and they drive past a church or they're Googling things, like, they're going to find a church and then they're going to go see what their Instagram looks like. They're going to see more about what the church is doing, what the church, like, demographic is, what they're talking about, like, all of those things you get from Instagram and sometimes Facebook. But I feel like most people are going to Instagram and looking up churches that way. And so it is one of those things that it's like, we want to put our best foot forward on social media and be clear of telling people who we are, what we're about, what you're going to experience here on a Sunday morning or at a midweek program, and continue to encourage and equip the people in our city and our state even. So I think it's just a good reminder.
That was one of the big things. One of the conversations I had with my boss when I first asked him, can I do creative things? I had looked at our Instagram account, and at that point we had 126 followers, which I'm not saying that's bad, but for us, we had over at that time over 1,200 kids on a weekend. Yeah. And so I told him, I was like, we've got 1,200 families that should be watching what we do, and we only have 126 followers. I was like, why? Like, that doesn't make sense. And so that was a project he gave me early on, was just like, build up our Instagram. Like, what can we do? Because I was like, and you never want to be, it's like both, and you want to be proud of your work, you never want to be prideful, if that makes sense. Yep. But I told him, I was like, in my opinion, we've got the best kids ministry in the world, and I hope every kids minister feels like that. Yeah. But I was like, why aren't we showing people, like, why aren't we encouraging parents and other churches? Like, we should share what we have. So I think that's another aspect of it, is it's not just like, look at me and all my followers. It's really like, if we can, again, it's an opportunity to really reach people and encourage and help and build, which is the heart of kids ministry. So yeah, that's awesome. Okay, I was thinking about this as I was, like, preparing for this conversation, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on using graphics and using screens and videos and all of those types of creative things to spread the gospel and reach people with the gospel story. How does the creative side of things meet telling the gospel story? Yeah. Well, I think if you look at God, he is so creative. And, you look at some of these fish. Have you ever, like, just Googled random fish? Do it sometime. It will blow your mind. There are fish in the ocean that, like, they look like they came out of a cartoon. But God did that. Yeah. Not because people would even see it for thousands and thousands of years, but because he was like, I want to be creative, and I just want to make it. And that's why you look at people, and people look so different from each other. All of us are so different. We think different. We do different things. The sunset is never the same. It's because he's a creative being. Yeah. And I think he puts that in people, not only to do, but also to enjoy. And so when we can partner that with his news, I feel like he blesses it. So I think it's very, very important to couple creativity with the gospel, especially when we're reaching kids, because they like it. I don't know how else to say it, except that it's fun to them. So when you can stand up with just yourself in a Bible and you can read just the Bible, and it is effective 100%. Right. If you can couple that with a powerful visual, it sticks for them. So I think if we can do what the Lord has created us to do and put those creative elements in, it's like putting a little hook into the kids' hearts. So when you're doing a video, when you're telling, I'm going to tell you a story about Zacchaeus, if they can actually see a teeny little Zacchaeus hopping across the screen, it just sticks in a different way, if that makes sense. So I think those, you can take graphics and you can take video, social media, all of those things to tell the gospel. And it's extremely effective because a lot of people, that's how they process information, especially in today's world.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I love the bridging the gap of like, yes, just saying the gospel story. Like, God does not need you to do all the bells and whistles. Like, if you just are faithful with the Great Commission and just tell people about the gospel, God is going to do the work. Like, end of story. But how much more fun is it when there is graphics, when there is a video, when you are bringing the story to life? And I love what you said of just like, God is a creative God. And when we get to create, and when we get to recognize the beauty that he has created, we are connecting the dots of pieces of God's character. That so much of kids ministry is just introducing kids to who God is. And
I think too, like, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
If you think about it like food, like you could 100% survive on just, rice and meat for the rest of your life. But God made so many things for you to taste. Strawberries and ice cream and, whatever things you like, spinach. And he made thousands of tastes, and he gave us taste buds, not because we need it, not because he needed us to have it to survive, but just because we like it, And so I think it's the same thing when you're creating, it's like you're creating a palette for kids. You can 100% serve them rice and they will live, but they will enjoy it so much more if you bring in some flavor to that, what you're giving them. So
I love that so much. I hope that as people are listening to this, it excites like their own creative side, that they're like, oh, like the opportunities are endless in terms of how to tell the gospel, how to tell stories throughout the Bible, how to communicate with kids and families, how to present different events and different things going on in your church. And I hope people hear this and it's not just like, oh, now I have another thing that I have to think about, and it's another thing that I have to add to the to-do list, but just about like thinking like, but what if? Like, what if we could just do an extra couple things? Or when you think about planning an event, you also think, okay, but how are we going to present this? Not just what is it going to look like the day of, but how can we present this in a way that's inviting and exciting and screams fun and kids and like, this is a safe place for you. And so it's like, sometimes they can listen to these conversations and be like, well, I'm not creative, I don't find this important. But I hope that as they're listening, it is important. It should be valued, but in the right place. And it's like, you can do it. You can add some things to what's happening on Sunday mornings and throughout the week. And it just adds a next level and next layer of the great things that are already happening in your ministry. So
also, I think if I can encourage you, as a kids leader, because I know it is kind of like, wait, another thing, like I'm trying so hard to survive here. But there is no greater value than a teenager. You know what I mean? Like, pull in a teenager, a 7th, 8th, 10th grader, and be like, hey, I want you to take pictures on your phone today and airdrop them to me so I have something to post. Or if it's an older student that you can trust, like, hey, I want you to draft a couple of posts for me. And because they love it and they're good at it. They're so fast. Like how you said, like it would take me 5 hours on Canva. Sometimes that's how I feel about Reels. But, hand it to a 15-year-old and they're like, here you go. Exactly. And it's the best thing you've ever seen, So don't be afraid to pull people in, because there is someone, I promise there is someone in your circle who can lift in the creative way.
Yeah.
So even if you're like, it's not me, there is someone you know that could do it and would be so excited to. So
that's such a great idea. I love that idea. And it is crazy, just teenagers in general, how fast they catch on to new technology.
Yeah.
And I do feel like the creative world is increasing like crazy. The desire to be creative and to communicate in a creative way is so loud right now. And I love it. Like, I love the ability for people to be creative and make art and be a part of art. And so that is such a great idea to like create a little student team that's like social media and graphics and design and hand them a computer and give them a Canva subscription. Like there's just ways to encourage that gifting in people, which is really sweet. So, okay, I have 2 more questions for you. Okay, one of them is, what is your favorite thing to design? Like when you are working with churches, or think back to like when you were doing all the design for the kids ministry you on staff at, what was one of your favorite things to work on or design over the course of you doing this?
I think, that's so hard. Okay, camp graphics would probably be my favorite. Yeah. Because my goal with every camp graphic was to create something where kids look at it and they're like, I'm going to Disneyland. Like when they see it, they're like, that's how they feel. It's like, if I get there, like it's going to be Disney. Like that is kind of like my goal. So I think, camp graphics.
That's awesome.
Would be fun.
I love that. Okay, the last question we always ask is, if you were talking to someone brand new in kids ministry who was jumping into their first job, brand new to this space, what would be your words of wisdom or advice? Okay,
I think my top advice to a kids minister would be, you're never going to arrive. So I think whether it's how many volunteers that you're hoping to have one day, or how many kids you're hoping to have in your ministry, or what kind of graphics, you're never going to arrive to a place where you feel like, I did it. Because of 2 things. Number one, there's always things changing, you know? And so I say that with the volunteers, because for a while when I first started kids ministry, I was just stressed all the time, because I was like, I was supposed to have 26 and I only have 21. And like, I got my roster up and now, 4 people have the flu. But once I just realized, like, I'm never going to arrive. And even if I got to the place where I thought I wanted to be, like, my hope is that I still feel like there's more. There's still more. So even when it comes to graphics, when it comes to building a team, or when it comes to building a ministry, like the Lord never stops. And so we don't need to stop. So as you're growing and as you're building, never get to a place where you're like, okay, I did it, I can rest now. Like just go at it with this mentality of like, there's always something more. There's always the next level, and we're going to push to get there. Not like a pressure push of like, I have all this to do, but more of like an excitement, like you're running a race, and like, man, let's go for it. And even when we passed the finish line that we thought we had, like, God has more up there. Like, he has more kids for you to reach. He has better graphics for you to design. He has, a bigger venue for you to fill, whatever it might be. We don't want to get complacent, I guess, would be my advice.
Yeah. That's such good advice of like, don't get complacent. There's always things to be doing, but there's always God offering you growth and teaching you new things.
If you live in a way that's like, someday I'll get there, you feel that pressure of like, like I have so much to do. But if you live in a way that's like, man, we're just going to keep going until the Lord returns, then it kind of lifts that off your shoulders. Of like, okay, it's not where I want it to be, but it's not where it was. So we're just going to keep on going step by step by step. And it kind of gives a little more freedom to enjoy it, because that's the goal. Enjoy it. It's a gift.
That's awesome. Okay, Maddie, where can people reach you? If they're listening to this and they're like, I need graphics, summer's coming, camps are coming, even like fall kickoff is around the corner. Like how do people get in contact with you? And then what are some projects that you love to take on, or like if people are like, what can Madi do to help me in the creative space in kids ministry? How would you answer that question?
Great. Okay. The two easiest places to reach me would be Instagram, which is Madi Hacks Creative, or my website, which is madihacks.com. Hacks as in H-A-X. So
yes,
those are the two places that are easiest to reach me. As far as projects, my goal is creative work for kids ministries. So I have redesigned complete venues. I've done t-shirts, videos, lyrics. I've done consulting with like not just graphics, but like what does our kids ministry need to change to go up to the next level, team training, website design, all kinds of stuff, logos. So if you're a kids minister and you're like, I need creative assistance or support, that's my goal. It's like, your personal creative person.
Great. I love that. Personal creative person. I love that. Well, we will link those things in the show notes so that people can go and find them and follow you and kind of just continue to be encouraged by you and the work that you're doing. And Madi, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. I want to say too, if on my Instagram, my goal is to give away lots of free things. So even if you're like, we have zero budget, like please follow, not just so I get a follower, but so that I can give you what I have. Cause I'm going to try as hard as I can to resource people. So
you're doing free workshops. You're doing a free prayer guide, right?
And some little, just kids ministry resources. If I can give them, then hopefully it'll be an encouragement. But thanks for having me. This was so fun.
Thanks, Madi.